What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, it is ACC Coastal Week. This is our fourth year doing the podcast. So this is, we've well established this is an ACC Coastal podcast. So, Daniel, I'm excited for, I think, one of the most compelling divisions in college football.
I agree. And last year was one of the best coastal years of all because the most coastal team of all in Pitt, the Pitt Panthers, won the division and the ACC. So they're definitely one of those teams, again, that has a good chance to win this division. They're one of those top teams as far as over-under rankings. So we'll definitely get into that. But definitely a lot of intrigue on this side this year. There's some new blood. There's some teams that you might expect to improve, some, new coaches, all kinds of stuff. Definitely a lot of excitement down in Miami. We'll get into that. So definitely excited. This is still, it's my favorite division to cover in all of college football. So
it's fun because the Coastal, it's like this most years, but especially this year, there is no clear-cut favorite to win the Coastal. And, you've got four teams that are within one game of a win total of each other. So I think there's some teams that I think most people are probably going to pick. But then I think there's other teams that are right there that I legitimately think there's four teams who can win the Coastal this year. And it wouldn't surprise me if any of the four won. So that's why I love the ACC Coastal. A lot of parity in this division. We had that 7-year run from like 2019, 2013 or whatever, where each of the 7 teams had won the division.
Had won it, yeah.
In consecutive years. So a fun division. We're going to talk through Miami, Pitt, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and Duke in that order by their respective win totals. So let's start at the top, Daniel, with the Miami Hurricanes. A lot of buzz coming out of Coral Gables down in Miami. Mario Cristobal leaves Oregon, goes back home where he played his college football, his alma mater. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but he does not leave Oregon for Miami under the state that it was in under Manny Diaz, in that Miami's off the field effort towards football. He had to have some guarantees to come to Miami, and we've seen that so far off the field. Can Mario Cristobal produce in year one on the field? Their win total set at 8.5, tied for best in the ACC Coastal. You were a Miami guy last year, Daniel. You hopping back on that train?
So I got on them a little early. I like what they're doing. The recruiting classes that they put in place, even under Manny Diaz previously, and then obviously Mark Richt before that, they have been building something that's been a little different from what we've seen in the past 2 decades from Miami. So, it's been 2 decades since Miami was truly relevant, and we're building back towards it. I agree with you regarding just kind of everybody pulling in the same direction in this program, in this organization as a whole, now that Mario Cristobal is there. But I think it took someone with the cachet of a Cristobal to come in to command that, because I do think that every other coach had kind of come in and was subject to whatever the athletic program or the university was, going to dictate for them as far as their terms or whatever else. And so, you got the big money donors and boosters coming in alongside Cristobal. So the best thing you can do is look at the coaching staff. He hired a phenomenal coaching staff, and you can't do that without some money. So they definitely came in. They did that. Josh Gaddis as the OC, and then bringing in Kevin Steele, defensive coordinator. They've got several great assistants all across that they pulled from everywhere else. So definitely a team full of recruiters. Cristobal's biggest thing has been, obviously, he was offensive line guy. So I think that's huge for a team like Miami, where that's been probably the biggest struggle, because they can recruit everything else, in the state of Miami, like I'm sure everybody has seen with what Howard Schnellenberger has, did way back in the day. But I think if they recruit down there, they can get all the skill positions that they need, but the lines of scrimmage is the issue. I think that's Cristobal's specialty. I think they're kind of meeting up at the right place. last year I was high on them because I felt like quarterback depth was a big deal, but I didn't have who ended up being their starter as one of my quarterbacks. Tyler Van Dyke, phenomenal year last year in relief of De'Aaron King, and he ended up just having, was it like 7 straight 300-yard passing games? It was something like that, where he just had a great year, had almost 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he didn't play the whole year. So
that was not 9 games.
9 games. So, I mean, he had it was a great year, and the receiving core was not at their best yet. They did have Charleston Rambo last year, who was the Oklahoma transfer. He's gone. He's in the NFL now. But just to return the rest of the supporting cast there. Return 3 offensive linemen, but it's the 3 you'd want, both the tackles and the center. So you got something to work with there. And then running backs, they did lose Cameron Harris. He exhausted his eligibility. He's gone. But Jalen Knighton, who is the lead back, he had 8 touchdowns last year. And then they got some reserves in Cody Franklin and Don Chaney Jr. So I do expect kind of a resurgence in the backfield. I think that this offense is going to be pretty explosive. And one of the reasons I'll say that, Jacob, is we see this happen a lot in the second year of a receiver class. This is the second year, and they had a really good receiving class last year come in. And you got about 4 or 5 sophomores. You got Keyshawn Smith, Jacoby George, Xavier Restbro, and then my personal favorite, Romello Brinson. I think he's going to have a great year. And I think that's going to be big, that continuity for Tyler Van Dyke. Again, you lost Charleston Rambo, but I think the depth of the receiving group is going to be way better. Those running backs is going to be a really good room. If they can get offensive line figured out, I think that's going to go a long way towards them. Now, as far as over/under on wins, we've got them at 8.5, right?
8.5. Yep.
Is what Vegas has them at. Going through their schedule, I mean, I'm circling Texas A&M, I'm circling Clemson, I'm circling Pittsburgh as the biggest games and they did lose to Florida State last year. So I'm circling those as kind of the big bugaboos. But I've got them winning two of those games. So I've only got them losing 2 games this year. I have them losing to Texas A&M, so an out-of-conference loss, and then I have them losing to Pittsburgh end of the year. So those are my 2 losses for Miami. I have them going 10-2, so I have them going over. In my head, I was like, "Oh, I'm lower on Miami than I think," and then I went through the schedule and I found 10 wins. So it's a lot to say. Returning quarterback with receivers is going to go a long way for me, and then you add to it, you've just got a tremendous coaching staff that I really believe in. Some real good playmakers on defense, Tyreek Stevenson, James Williams, guys like that. I think that they're going to – Leonard Taylor only played a lick last year. He's a 5-star former top 5 player in the country, going to be on that defensive line. So I might see a resurgence at Miami defensive line. Lot to enjoy next year with the Canes. What say you, Jacob?
I mean, look, Cristobal returns home, assembled a phenomenal coaching staff. All the off-the-field stuff at Miami has been phenomenal. And I'm like you. I think we're liking this way, Daniel, in that it's like if the public's really high on something, right? You want to fade it. Fade the public. And
Be
I
smarter
think
than
everybody
the room kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh my God, Miami. And so, you and I were high on Miami last year. I feel like, we're like, okay, this is it. It's going to happen. All the pieces are there. And it didn't happen for us. But what did happen last year was Pitt. And the thing is, the year before, Daniel, 2019 or 2020, this was a Pitt podcast.
We were all about it.
We were just a year early. I think we might have just been a year early on Miami. And this is one of these instances where it's like, man, I want to fade the public here, but also don't want to outthink the room. And Miami, their situation in firing their head coach is much different than most people firing their head coach.
Yeah.
The cupboard is not empty at Miami. In fact, it's pretty stacked. So Miami has recruited at really the past 3 years been like a top 11 level. So again, it's not where I think Miami can be, but it's also top 11 in the country.
Way better than a lot of
talent-wise.
places. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially in the ACC, that would put you tied for second or third best in the ACC with another team we're going to talk about, behind Clemson only in recruiting. So talent is there. You mentioned you bring in Josh Gaddis. What I think this does for your offense is Josh Gaddis is phenomenal with his scheme for the run game. He did it at Alabama when he was co-offensive coordinator with Mike Loxley, where different scheme in the spread to get open running lanes. Like his numbers at Michigan of yards before contact were some of the best in the country for the running back. So the scheme works. And I think if you're Miami, you saw phenomenal passing game last year. You get that back with Van Dyke. You mentioned 25-6 for almost 3,000 yards in over only 9 games. You get that with Jalen Knight returning with improved offensive line play and a better scheme in the run game. That's really going to open up the offense. And you mentioned the receivers, that sophomore class now is going to be really good. Then you also bring in a transfer from Clemson and Frank Ladson Jr., and I think he's that Charleston Rainbow. So the problem at Clemson was there were 4 players like him, and that was Clemson's problem is you had 4 6'4", 225 to 240 receivers.
Possession
and
guys.
You didn't have anybody that could take the top off. Like Keyshawn Smith's your take the top off kind of receiver.
He's quick.
Now you got a big body receiver in Ladson. You have Will Mallory as a tight end. So you've got a bunch of different style playmakers, which is a quarterback's best friend because there could be a different mismatch on every play for the offense. So offense, I think, is going to take a big step forward. You also bring in 2 transfers in the offensive line from Oregon who came with Cristobal. So that's a big deal. You bring in Kevin Steele. So long as he doesn't try to throw a coup, he coaches a hell of a defense.
He's a phenomenal D coordinator. Just maybe keep him just a couple of years so he doesn't get too big of a head.
That's right. And then let him go or get him a head coaching job elsewhere.
Right.
You mentioned Leonard Taylor. He's going to highlight what I think will be a top 3 defensive line in the conference. If there's an area of weakness on defense, it's linebacker. But you have experience at linebacker. But they weren't great last year, especially with run fits. So if there's an area of weaknesses there, secondary is going to be really good. It should be among the best in the ACC. I mean, you highlight former 5-star Tyreek Stevenson is one of your lockdown corners. James Williams is a sophomore, former 5-star. So they're going to highlight a secondary that brings a lot of experience back, a lot of depth. Again, I went into this same as you saying, all right, let's fade the public. Let's pump the brakes on Miami. But I'll tell you what, I'm buying the hype. I think Tyler Van Dyke could be the best quarterback in the conference, and it's a really good quarterback conference. I think Miami has a top 3 unit at every position group in the ACC, except for maybe linebacker. And that's a maybe there. Tough schedule, right? I mean, I mentioned I'm sitting there going, okay, it's a tough schedule. You get Texas A&M out of conference on the road. You draw Clemson out of the Atlantic. And I want you, Daniel, the win total is 8.5. I still look at the schedule and go, you know what? It's a 10-win team. And so I'm definitely buying the over. I think this is a Miami, a 10-win team, and I think they'll win the Coastal this year. I think this is a team you circle as a college football playoff dark horse, especially because of the schedule. If they come out of this with 11 wins, no doubt, and again, if they win the conference, you will have played Clemson twice and either beaten Clemson once or beaten Texas A&M once. So they have the road to get there.
Right.
I do think it's too tough to pick something like that, but I'm circling this team as a dark horse for sure. That they got all the right stuff there in that they're going to have the blue chip ratio. They've got a fighter pilot at quarterback. You've got some different kind of playmakers at receiver. So we talked about last year, the keys to winning a national championship and getting into the playoff. They've got all the keys. So they're a team I would definitely circle as a dark horse. And I think they're one of the Coastal this year.
Another thing I didn't even mention, just to tack on, is, one of my big points last year was Jake Garcia being the backup quarterback. He's still the backup quarterback, former 5-star, QB. So being able to keep someone like that with NIL, that's one of the big things is he's kind of stuck around, even though him and Tyler Van Dyke are the same year school-wise. He's sticking around. So I do think that that's big if there is an injury, because I do think that they have high-level quarterback play behind.
They've got depth.
Yeah.
And then even behind him, you and I saw him last year at the Corky Kell, Ja'Cory Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Is a true freshman this year, 4-star quarterback. So, and they've got a bunch of guys who they might have different, I'll say, styles of play running wise, all three of them, but all three of them have big arms, like
Right.
big arms, which is great for continuity for if a quarterback does go down, you don't change your scheme for next guy up, which is great. So, I mean, it sounds like you and I are both really high on Miami.
Surprisingly.
We were a year early. This is it. This is the formula of we picked him to. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that. We picked him to win the ACC last year.
Well, we picked the right year because Clemson was down.
To be fair, we picked the Coastal team to win the conference, and they did. But we were a year early on Pitt. I'm just gonna correct here and go. We were a year early on Miami, but let's double down and pick Miami. So also with 8.5 wins is the defending ACC champion, Pittsburg Panthers, which is fun to say. 8.5 is their win total, coming off of an ACC championship, coming off of a New Year's 6 bowl game berth, came up short, but had a lot of opt-outs in that game as well. So, hey, Pitt comes in with the target on their back. Win total is 8.5. Where are you going with the Panthers, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm high on the Panthers this year. Even after, them doing so well last year. I like they've got all 5 starting offensive linemen back. And then they've got their top 3 rushers all coming back. And then, you add to it, they've got some returning talent at receiver. Granted, Jordan Addison transferring to USC, definitely a big depletion. Obviously, Biletnikoff winner, everything of the sort. He was definitely someone you probably based your whole offense around in a sense. So losing him, you still have Gavin Bartholomew, Jared Wayne, a couple other guys who made some big time plays. But goodness, I did not realize Jordan Addison, 17 touchdowns last year, just phenomenal year. So losing out on him, but really interesting, Jacob. They're getting Keaton Slovis coming in at quarterback, obviously transferred from USC. Graham Harrell takes over as the offensive coordinator. Excuse me. Is that right?
It's their rival.
No. That's their rival. That's West Virginia, who I'm excited about that game. Because he's going to play his former teammate JT Daniels in that opener. So this is a great matchup. That's actually a game, one of their losable games that I have on the schedule. Obviously, they're going to play Tennessee in their, the home and home that they had last year. So they're playing that game at home this year. But just kind of making my way through the schedule. That's the 2 of their tougher games are right at the beginning. Then they schedule kind of lightens up a little bit. Western Carolina, Rhode Island, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Louisville. I've got them losing 2 games and in the ACC, and then I have them beating West Virginia. Yeah, they're going to go 10-2. I have them going over win total. They're going 10-2, but both losses are in the ACC. So Miami will edge them out because I only have them losing 1 ACC game. But I'm very high on Pitt. I think they're going to be able to weather the storm. Both those first 2 games are very intriguing, though. West Virginia and Tennessee. Just they're both out of conference, but those are both, regional rivalries, I guess. West Virginia's rivalry, but Pitt and Tennessee last year, that was a phenomenal game. And Tennessee kind of crashed the party in that game, kind of showed up before anyone was ready to give Tennessee any credit. And now that Tennessee's had a good year, are they able to beat them this year, or does Pitt beat them again? Is Pitt just a touch better? That'll be fun to watch. But I have them winning. I have Pitt winning. So 10-2.
10-2. So win total is 8.5. They're a team that I look at the schedule and I want to be high on Pitt.
Right.
If their out of conference wasn't what it was, I might be picking them to, I guess out of conference doesn't matter, but be a 10-win team again. But I'm not going as high as 10 wins, and I'm still going to go over the 8.5 win total. I'm going 9-3 for Pitt. So, but I think losing a player like Jordan Addison really did change our mindset about Pitt because like replacing Pickett with Keaton Slovis I don't think Slovis is going to be Pickett, but I also don't think there's going to be like with just that, with just Slovis replacing Pickett. I don't think it's a giant step back. I think it's a step back.
Right.
As long as everything else stay the same, like it was supposed to. And then Jordan Addison leaves, and that's a huge blow. So I think that's like
He's their best player
by a lot, like
right.
best player by a lot. You lose Pickett, you get Keaton Slovis. Frank Cignetti, second time here at Pitt. He was previously at Boston College last year. He had a first stint at Pitt, though. So offensive line should be good. Running game should be great. Again, like returning production, they ranked 31st in the country, 42nd on offense, 34th on defense. So they get a lot of guys back from a team that won the ACC. The highlight of this team is going to be the defensive line. This is a team that will have probably the second best defensive line in the conference. And I mean, probably a top 10 unit in college football, which is saying a lot. So they return everybody in the defensive line. So that should be tough for teams to run on them, especially. They got a little bit of a pass rush. Again, I think their out of conference is tough. Plus, you have your two toughest games in your division on the road. So Miami and North Carolina, both on the road. Schedule's tough. So I think this is still a really good football team. I'm going to go over the win total, still high in them, 9-3 for our Pittsburgh Panthers this year. Got to come down a little bit after we've been high on them. So got to correct here. 9-3 for Pitt this year. Let's go to a team with one less game of a win total. So Mac Brown in year 4 at North Carolina. Coming off of a disappointing season, a lot of people picked them to be a college football playoff dark horse last year, and same how his junior year. That was a team that luckily you and I were very right about last year. Mm-hmm. And hey, the Jake Fromm effect. So hey, he lost his top 4 pass catchers, 2 1,000-yard rushers. Not going to be as easy to be a superstar. And that and several other things came to fruition. But North Carolina now coming back 7.5 the win total after winning only 6 games. So obviously Vegas a little higher on the team than last year's performance. But where are you at with the Tar Heels?
Yeah, I'm trying not to think too much about quarterback because I think that whoever plays, whether it be Drake May or Jacoby Criswell, I think will play. I think they're going to be pushed by the other one to be a good quarterback. So I'm expecting good quarterback play with whoever plays quarterback between those two. Add to that, they returned their top 3 receivers from last year. Josh Downs, namely, obviously he had a good year, especially once he got going. 8 touchdowns, obviously almost 1,400 yards. So just a phenomenal year. That's just huge to have, returning receiving core like they've got. I mean, Antoine Green, just another great one. So add to it, a couple returning on the offensive line. They've got a lot of area to improve there, but, defensively, they should be very strong. Cameron Kelly and Tony Grimes back there in the secondary. Tony Grimes, I mean, it's like crazy to think how he's a junior already because it's like he was supposed to be in the 2021 class. Obviously, he, reclassified and joined that 2020 year famously when the state of Virginia canceled their high school games, and he was a 5-star. And so it's one of those things where getting a 5-star early like that, it may not have the immediate impact that you're expecting normally when you get a 5-star out of college because he classified and he was supposed to be a senior in high school when he was playing for you as a freshman. And then last year he has a pretty good year. And then you add to it this year, he might be kind of coming into his own physically as just kind of maturing. Not that this whole defense rides on one player. Obviously you got Cedric Gray coming back as a leading tackler as a middle linebacker. So I think they've got some really good depth and talent on that defensive side. And I'm really high on Gene Chizik as a defensive coordinator returning. As a DC, he's been very impressive in his career. He's had a couple stints at UNC, or this will be his second stint. And just he knows the area, knows the program really well. So I expect him to come in and really kind of add some juice to that side of the ball, and them to give some people some trouble this year. Going through the schedule, obviously Notre Dame, they get them out of their ACC allotment this year, or for Notre Dame's ACC allotment, I should say. But Miami, I do think that's going to be a tough game for them this year at Miami. Pittsburgh, the usual suspects. NC State and North Carolina, that's going to be a very good game. I wouldn't be surprised if UNC wins that game this year. I think may have picked it the other way when I picked NC State last week. But that being said, I like NC State. They're 7.5. I like them to go over. I think 8-4 is very likely for this team.
8-4.
Yeah.
So North Carolina, again, we rightly predicted how they did last year. I'm going to attempt to do the same. Quarterback, you mentioned it. I'm not concerned because I think you're going to get good quarterback play regardless for the same reason. Like I'm high on Drake May, but if he gets beat out, that means he got beat out by better quarterback play. Therefore, I'm not concerned if Jacoby Criswell starts. You got to replace some production at running back, but running back room is deeper than it was last year. So you got to replace some on the field stats, but a deeper running back room than last year. On offense, obviously Phil Longo on his third year with the system, I think he's one of the best play callers in the country. North Carolina could have the best wide receiver room in the ACC. Now, I think the top 3 wide receiver units in conference are all here in the ACC Coastal. So Miami being one, North Carolina being another, and the other one we haven't talked about yet. So we'll get
Georgia
there,
Tech?
but it's not Georgia Tech. We can start there. Let's go to the defense. The defense should be much improved. So this was an area of concern last year for North Carolina. I remember us joking last year before the Wake Forest North Carolina game saying, the only thing worse than North Carolina's defense, and that's Wake Forest's defense. This should be much improved. They've recruited as well as Miami and Clemson, the defensive line, and really they only trail Clemson with the way they've recruited on the defensive line in conference. So they've got freshmen Keyshawn Silver and Travis Shaw, both former 5-star recruits, and they might not even start. So Miles Murphy, not that one. North Carolina has one too. Really good. Cammy and Rucker, really good. So their defensive line should be stout this year. Cedric Gray was their leading tackler at linebacker in 2021. He returns. Chris Collins, they're a great duo at linebacker. You mentioned Tony Grimes, Jacorius Conley. That's an elite duo in the secondary. So defense, I think, should be much improved. I mean, this is a defense last year, Daniel, that ranked, I had this up, 101st in SP Plus at the end of the year. I keep thinking, what do they need to be for North Carolina to go over this win total and potentially contend for the Coastal? Because that's how high I am on UNC, is I think this is a team that could contend for the Coastal. I think they should contend for the Coastal. And I'm not picking them to win the Coastal because of schedule, but if we turn around, it's week 15 and we're waiting on conference championship week and North Carolina's clinched the Coastal, I would not at all be shocked. And so I'm high on this team, Daniel. I'm going 10-2 with the Tar Heels. I'm going way over the win total. This is a team that here's a fun stat that I found. I might put this on Twitter to see if it gets noticed at all. 9 of North Carolina's highest rated recruits of all time. If you take their top 20 highest rated recruits ever, 9 of them are on this roster.
Ooh.
So recruiting by year, Mac Brown comes in 30th their first year. They went 14th, 11th. Only teams that have topped that are Clemson and Miami barely. So Miami went 10, 11, 11 in the years they went 11, 14, 14. So I am buying that this talent is eventually going to win games in the field. And again, you mentioned Tony Grimes, a junior. His age really is a sophomore, though. We've kind of gotten that bit. They had a big defensive line and offensive line class last year. They're sophomores now. They've got depth there now. So that was a big area of concern for me last year. Wide receiver room I mentioned could be the best in conference, where that was a concern last year. Josh Downs should highlight that. He's probably going to be an All-American at receiver. schedule is easier than both Pitt and Miami, and that includes a schedule that has Notre Dame on it. So 10-2, I think they tie Miami in their conference record, but I'm leaning Miami to win that game, which would lean me to pick Miami to win the Coastal. So Miami gets a bye before they play North Carolina, and it doesn't go the other way around. All that being said, I am very high North Carolina, picking them to finish second in the division. Go Heels. Let's go to another team that has a 7.5 win total, which is Virginia. So the Cavs, coming off of a season where their coach just called it quits, hung it up, which, hey, in all seriousness, I don't blame him. Coaching college football is a very hard job. So hope Bronco's doing well. We love Bronco Mendenhall, a coach you and I both love and respect. So win total at 7.5. They bring in, oh my goodness, my mind's going to go blank right here. Thank you. I was like, I almost said Tony Grimes. I'm like, wait, that's not his name. Wrong Tony. North Carolina on the brain. So bring in Tony Elliott, former Clemson offensive coordinator. Win total 7.5. Daniel, where are you going with the Cavaliers?
Well, one thing, Tony Elliott, probably very excited that he gets to coach Brennan Armstrong. It's a phenomenal quarterback. So an offensive mind coming in at coach, just like, coming in and being there with Brennan Armstrong, who, had a great time while he was under Bronco Mendenhall. He had almost 4,500 yards last year, 31 touchdowns, 10 picks. So he's kind of Mr. Do Everything. He had, 250 more yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns there. So, 40 touchdowns on the whole for Armstrong. He's definitely a do-it-all QB. I'm interested to see how Tony Elliott uses him. Bronco had kind of gotten in the habit of, he just runs everything through the quarterback, whether it's, running some read option, running some, just spread concepts, different things like that. So interested to see how that goes. Obviously, Keaton Thompson, leading pass catcher, leading our receptions on the year from last year. He's coming back. Obviously, he's the former QB from Mississippi State. He made the transition to wide receiver. He's still back. Dontravion Wicks, 1,200 yards last year at receiver, 9 touchdowns. So they've got their top 3 pass catchers back. So I think that's huge. They're actually, I think that's going to be something to have intact for this team. They're going to be a tough out because I do think they're going to score some points on everybody. And their schedule is really not bad. So starts out with Richmond. They go at Illinois. I think that's a sneaky tough game. People might not be circling. That's going to be an actual a good aptitude test for both teams. Just kind of see where they are. Home versus Old Dominion. Syracuse and Duke are both lousy. Louisville, I just think that, they hit that tough stretch of Miami, North Carolina, Pittsburgh. And then, Coastal Carolina, Virginia Tech, none of those are going to be picnics. 7.5. Man, a first-year coach, I really don't want to go over. I'm tempted, though, because the schedule, let's see, they'd have to lose 5 games. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm gonna say they go over. I'm gonna say they're 8-4. So I have 3 ACC losses, and then they're gonna lose to Illinois at Illinois. So that's what I have them doing. 8-4 this year, going over, and Tony Elliott's first year.
Love it. So Virginia, one of those other teams that I mentioned that might have the best receiver room in the ACC. So 3 teams in the Coastal, I think I'll have the top 3 receiver rooms in the conference: Virginia, UNC, and Miami in some order. Get to know these names. Hey, it's June. Get to know these names so you can be ahead of your friends at work. Billy Kemp, Dontavian Wicks, Keaton Thompson. 3 different style receivers. Daniel, I feel like Keaton Thompson is my John Reese Plumlee for you in that when he transferred to Virginia. You got to think this was after the 2019 season. Bryce Perkins, Mr. Do It All for the Virginia offense. I mean, and I do mean do it all. He led the team in rushing and passing. And I was like, oh my goodness, Keaton Thompson is just the perfect fit. Like big bodied, 6'4", quick, just like almost like a Dak Prescott style, like offense through him. Like it's a perfect fit. Of course, Brennan Armstrong beats him out. He moves over to receiver, similar to JRP, and I'm still like, man, he's a playmaker. I'm excited about him, and I still am. So Keaton Thompson is my JRP. Love Keaton Thompson. Again, like 6'4", 220 kind of guy at receiver. That's hard to guard. And then when you got like Billy Kemp, who's like a 5'9", 190, he's like 100, a 10-second 100-meter guy. So he's super, super quick. I'm excited about this offense. Daniel, if I asked you to list the top 10 offenses in college football last year, would you have even thought about Virginia?
No, but it's not because I don't think that they're explosive. It's because I forget that they have a football program sometimes. When you're talking about national college football. But when we're talking about the ACC Coastal, it's like, of course I should have known, because as soon as anyone mentions Virginia, I'm like, Brennan Armstrong. He's explosive and, has a great – he fills up a stat sheet.
Well, and the reason people might not think about Virginia is that's because their defense was like a, top 100 team in college football last year. So defense was terrible. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if the defense is going to be much better, especially when returning production. Virginia ranks 123rd overall, 125th on defense. So that's a big reason for that. I am concerned about the defense, but I'm looking at the schedule and I'm going, all right. So if they got to score 40 a game, like if the offense is going to be as good as it was last year, and let's just say they're a top 10 offense again, who has an offense that can run with these guys? And I count 4 teams that have an offense that can run with them. And here's the thing: the defense I think is going to be so bad that I'm just going to count those 4 as losses as teams that can actually run with them, and score with them. And so I'm going 8-4, just like you. I'm going 4 losses in conference though, because I do think Miami, UNC, Pitt, and Louisville can all score with them, score for score, and then have a defense that can actually make one stop, which is all I think that they're going to need in a game against Virginia's defense. So, again, I think Tony Elliott and this offense is a perfect marriage, especially to have success in year one. So I am going to go over that win total, going to go 8-4. Daniel, that puts me at 4 overs so far, which means I have a bad feeling about the bottom half of this conference.
Losses have to come somewhere. So
the losses got to come from somewhere. So 8-4 for me for Virginia. Let's go to their rival, to Blacksburg, Virginia Tech. They're also replacing a head coach, but not because the head coach walked away. This one was a firing. Virginia Tech breaks their bowl streak. So they had the longest active bowl streak in college football. That got broken under Justin Fuente. So he's got to go. But win total now set at 6.5. So right above that, bowl eligibility for the Hokies. Where are you going for year one of Coach Pry?
Yeah, Brent Pry coming over from Penn State as defensive coordinator. I like the move. I think it actually was some of these schools try to get too flashy with their hire. I think this is a very solid, smart, calculated decision. I don't know if it's going to reap a ton of benefits year one. I think this is something where Pry is – I feel like he's going to be a good program builder and kind of build more of a stable floor for them and, just kind of get things back going. It's tough for me to say the direction that Beamer had them, but because it's like, the direction that the greatest coach in their history has had them go. But definitely needs to do something more than what Fuente was doing. I think that was kind of a long time coming. There was about 3 years that Fuente was on the hot seat. It's funny to think that Hendon Hooker was here, because now look at him at Tennessee and you're thinking, he's a dark horse Heisman contender because of the stats he's going to put up. And I say dark horse, and I mean it in every sense of the word. Like he's not going, he's not going to be on anybody's top list. But that being said, he was big time in that resurgence for Tennessee last year.
Oh, I'd put him on my top 10 of Heisman contenders.
Okay. That's fair.
like you said, that offense is a cheat code. He's going to have the stats to do it.
And
If
he's going to beat a bunch of teams up.
Yeah, he's gonna have the stage to do it. Anyway, we'll talk about Tennessee later.
Yeah, exactly. They'll have their time. Braxton Burmeister last year, solid, but I mean, the offense wasn't explosive as a whole. Grant Wells coming in from Marshall, I was impressed with him last year, and just what he was able to do at Marshall. 34 touchdowns and 22 picks. The 34 touchdowns very impressive. 22 picks, not so great. So he's definitely a gunslinger mentality, sling it all over the yard. That being said, I do think that they'll score some points this year, more so than what they did last year. I do think the turnover is going to catch up. They have a pretty good defense coming back with like 7 to 8 returning starters, depending upon which area you're looking. But got their leading sack guy, top 2 tacklers back. But losing some in the receiving core, that might be a good thing. We'll see. But I'm gonna go. This is are they 7-5? Is there 7-5 as well? Or sorry,
Win total?
7.5. Excuse me.
6.5.
6.5. Okay. I'm still gonna go under. I like them at 6-6. I think they'll lose 6 games, but they'll still make a bowl game. I think in some games they're gonna look better than they'll look ahead of schedule in a couple games. Going through though, I mean, West Virginia, Boston College, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Miami, NC State. Those are all very tough games. At Liberty is not going to be easy. And then I have Virginia beating Virginia Tech this year. So, yeah. So I'm gonna have one of those out of conference losses beat West Virginia, and then 5 in conference losses.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna go under Virginia Tech. I'm also going 6-6, and same as you, 3-5 in conference. So Virginia Tech is kind of opposite of Virginia in that their offense was really bad last year, and what was actually decent last year was their defense, and that should be pretty good this year. You bring in a defensive-minded head coach, you bring back a ton of production on defense. So this is a team that ranks in the top 25 returning production on defense, but offense is the opposite. So 106 in returning production on offense. This offense should be pretty bad in year one, especially because of the lack of depth on offensive line. Like, this is a team that if they have like one guy go down, it could go downhill fast with their lack of depth on offensive line. So lucky for them. I mean, you do have West Virginia out of conference, but in conference, I mean, you draw NC State from the Atlantic, you draw BC, and that's not the worst draw you could have gotten out of the Atlantic. So schedule sets up though. I mean, at Liberty is not going to be an easy walk in the park. Their toughest stretch though is going to be you play West Virginia, at UNC, at Pitt, Miami, in back-to-back weeks, and that's a tough road to do, especially you're one of a head coach. So I'm buying the defense making a jump under a year one head coach, but I think the offense might be slightly worse than last year simply because of offensive line depth. Malachi Thomas should be the highlight of that offense. He shut off as a true freshman last year, not playing in many games either. So he might pop so long as that offensive line holds. But yeah, I'm going to go 6-6 here. Winning a bowl game should be celebrated in year one for Virginia Tech. So that's a great first step, but going 6-6 under that win total. All right, now we get to the low win totals here. So Georgia Tech at 3.5 is the win total. This is year 4 of Jeff Collins. I mean, Daniel, you get 3.5 is a low win total. So you going over or under this one?
This is tough. This is not tough. It's tough for me to say this. This was easy in that looking at this schedule, Georgia Tech is a very difficult schedule for a team that's not very good. If a team that was good, I think that they could win 6-7 games. But unfortunately for Georgia Tech, they're not very good. losing obviously your best player in Jahmyr Gibbs does not help, but you add to it Jordan Mason exhausting his eligibility, who is, one of the running backs for the past several years, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, not Jahmyr Gibbs, I already mentioned him, Jamias Griffin, another top running back who's a 4-star, entered his name twice into the transfer portal. He entered it, took it out, entered it again, and is transferring. So, but you add to it, they're bringing in Hassan Hall from Louisville, who averaged over 7 yards a carry last year. So they do have some explosiveness back there. Dante Smith, returning from last year as well, who is just one of the backs. They're going to be okay, but they only have like 3 returning starters from offense and 3 on defense, which again is not the worst thing in the world because not everybody was phenomenal last year. But Jeff Sims is back at quarterback. He will be pushed by the transfer Zach Gibson, I believe it's Western Kentucky, is coming in from. Akron. So he's coming in from Akron. Jeff Sims, though, I'm curious to see what this offense will be like because they bring in Chip Long, who has been at Memphis and then most recently at Tulane under Willie Fritz. What's this offense going to look like? He's taking over in his first year for Patino, Dave Patino, who's just, I guess the big thing, everyone's talking about Georgia Tech. They think about, coming from the triple option and how it's been a rebuild. Jeff Collins in each year has won 3 games. So he's won 9 games in 3 years. They signed a 7-year deal when he signed up. I'm curious if they're going to wait it out if he still wins just 3 games this year. Because looking at the schedule, Jacob, I would be satisfied with 3 wins as a non-partial fan for Georgia Tech with what my expectations would be based on their schedule. They play Clemson to start with. Then they play Western Carolina. I think that they will win that game. Then they play Ole Miss, who you and I both have power rated in the top 7. They play at UCF in the bounce house, which that's my UCF Knights right there. John Reese Plumlee. At Pittsburgh, they play Duke at home. I think that they have a really good chance of winning that game. We'll talk about Duke in a minute. And then they have a bye week, and they play Virginia on a Thursday night. That being said, Virginia is going to score some points. And Virginia's circling at the game is like, hey, this is a get-right game. We're going to score a bunch of points against Georgia Tech. So then they go to Florida State, to Virginia Tech, play Miami at home, at North Carolina, at Georgia. I mean, if someone can find 4 wins on this schedule, I mean, more power to them. Like, I think the better line would be 2.5 because I would have problem picking 3 wins. I think this is a 2-win team. I think 3 wins, he keeps his job. That's how bold I'm going to say this. If he wins 3 games on this schedule, he keeps his job. And this is coming from a guy, or coming for, Jeff Collins, who has lost some of his layup games, like in year 1 to the Citadel, and last year, the first game of the year, Northern Illinois. So he's got to beat Western Carolina this year. So he's got to make sure he takes care of that game. And they really got to take care of Duke in a year 1 of a head coach. So I feel like I talked a lot more than I should have of Georgia Tech, but it is what it is.
Georgia Tech ranks 109th in returning production, 88th on offense, 110th on defense. This is an out-of-conference schedule that includes Clemson, Ole Miss, UCF. Excuse me, not Clemson.
I was about to say.
Ole Miss, UCF, and Georgia. It's a schedule that includes Clemson out of the Atlantic. You play Miami every year. You get Florida State out of the Atlantic, who I'm high on going into this year. This is a team that under Jeff Collins has yet to win more than 3 games. SP Plus rankings, 2019, they ranked 111th. 2020, 75th. Last year, 96. And now you're giving me a win total of 3.5. Find me 4 wins. What is there to have hope in? What is there to put, you know what? We can circle this one. We got this game. And there's not on the schedule. So I'm going under. I'm going 3.5. Under the 3.5, excuse me, 2-10.
Yeah.
And I think Jeff Collins gets fired. Here's the thing. If I'm Georgia Tech, even if he wins 3 games, would I be impressed? Yes, but that should not be what keeps his job is winning 3 games. If he does not win 4 games, I think he's got to make a bowl. I think he's gone for this year. But if you don't win 4, I think you got to be gone. You can't have 3 wins, and that it shows no movement. Like 3 wins, 3 wins, 3 wins, 3 wins. There's no like program building going on there.
From a financial standpoint, they could afford the buyout more or less after this season. So that being said, I do think that there is a certain contingent within the Georgia Tech community that would like to stop paying coaches to not coach the team, because they've just stopped paying Chan Gailey 3 years ago. When they started paying Jeff Collins, they stopped paying Chan Gailey. Those young fans out there might not remember that Chan Gailey was the coach of Georgia Tech before Paul Johnson. Past few years, they've been paying Paul Johnson to not coach this team. It's a rough game when you have to keep paying buyouts. So I think if you win 3 games, personally, they're going to keep him. But we'll see. It's a tough spot, because you look at a quarterback like Jeff Sims, who is a 4-star that you flipped from Florida State to be committed to you, coming in, and you had Jahmyr Gibbs. There's a lot of juice as far as recruiting goes, and then it did not translate on the field to wins. And then now you're kind of up the creek with, Jeff Sims in his 3rd year, who has played in 18 games and turned the ball over 20 times. I just don't know where you go from here. So we'll see if the change of offensive coordinator makes a big enough deal. They have fired several assistant coaches this year, and they kept defensive coordinator mostly because of the scheme that Collins wants to run, the 4-2-5. So we'll see if that matters. He has made the size profiles different on the lines of scrimmage, so they at least look like a team that should be good. They're just not very good. So
last 2 years in recruiting, 47th and 53rd. That's not going to cut it. not when you're in Atlanta. I mean, so we spent way too much time talking about Georgia Tech.
It's just because we're local. We're both from Atlanta.
We're from Atlanta. We got a lot of family and friends that are Tech fans. So I'm sorry to offer no hope. But again, I ask you, find me 4 wins and tell me why I should believe in it. And I will listen. I want to buy in.
My ears are open.
Want them to be good. It's not happening in 2022. Let's go to another team that it's not happening for in 2022. The Duke Blue Devils, their win total set at 3. So half a game less than Georgia Tech. Daniel, can you find me 4 wins on Duke's schedule?
We really should go to that Georgia Tech Duke game, Jacob, because that is going to be pivotal for both teams on
October 8th. Hey, that's a big day for college football, though. I don't know if I'm going to miss those other games.
We don't want to miss those other games. I mean, normally when you're grabbing teams like Temple, Northwestern, North Carolina A&T, and Kansas out of conference, you're confident and you're like, we're going 4-0. Not when you're Duke. Okay, we will see. I do think that they stand a good chance against Kansas. They stand a good chance against North Carolina A&T, maybe even Temple. But I also feel like they're going to lose those games. This is a new coach, and Mike Elko taking over. And as a first-year coach, the team was just not very good last year. Returning 5 starters on offense, 4 on defense. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I don't think that they eclipse 3 wins, because I am higher on these other teams that are kind of in the middle to have really good seasons, and then those teams at the top to have great seasons. I have 2 10-2 teams in this division. Someone's going to be taking a bunch of these losses. I don't think Duke is good enough to string together 4 straight wins, which would be their first 4 games. They're all out of conference. because I do think they're going to be the punching bag in the conference itself. But I do think they could probably go 2-2 in those. So I've got them at 2-10 as well. I have them losing at Georgia Tech for what it's worth. So, but yeah, I have them going 2-10, so under.
2-10 for me as well. I mean, the win total is at 3 for a reason. I do like Mike Elko as a good hire. He's a good football guy.
I was surprised they got him, to be fair. Like, I think he's a higher profile coach than what I was expecting Duke to pull in. Now, granted, I thought the same thing of David Cutcliffe, and then Duke made him less attractive by the end.
How old is Mike Elko? He is. Sorry. Oh, he's only 44? Man, I thought he was way older than that. Well, that ignores that point. I was going to say, hey, with how well they treated Cutcliffe, maybe he's just like hey, I'm happy to go right out my career here. Like 44. Now I thought he was like 60. No, but look, this is a team that ranks 125th in returning production, 121st on offense, 112th on defense. They're just going to be bad. Like, this team needs a complete rebuild from the ground up, like knock it down and build it back. Rebuilds like that typically mean a really, really bad year one. I mean, this will be one of the worst teams in FBS this year. I think they'll be outside the top 100 in both offense and defense by year's end. So you get an out-of-conference game against Northwestern, which isn't easy. The even years, they tend to have good years over at Northwestern. So not catching them on a good year this year.
It's the accountants, man. It's balance. The balance sheet lines up on those even years, and so.
Oh goodness, you get Wake Forest out of the Atlantic in Boston College. Not the worst draw, but when you're Duke, is there a good draw out of the Atlantic?
You want Syracuse, all right? That's what I'm telling you.
Syracuse and BC. So. At Kansas won't be easy either. So both of those being road games, I just think it's going to be a rough year one. That being said, I like Elko. I like him as a head coach. I like the hire. But same for me, 2-10, 0-8 in conference. I'm going under that one total of 3. Next week, we're going to tackle the Big 12. So Big 12, that awkward 10-team conference. So we'll just hit all of it, power through, longer episode. But Big 12 next week. Be sure to follow us on social at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.